गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरु साक्षात् परब्रह्मा गुरु साक्षात् परब्रह्मा तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः.
Yesterday, you had a look at the philosophy of Saint Augustine. I told you about the concept of the original sin. You heard it as a story, but it has very deep ramifications. Freedom. Adam and Eve had freedom to act in whatever manner they liked. They chose to eat the fruit. They were not bound to do it. God bestowed upon them the gift of freedom and they abused it. Now, did not God know they will abuse it? God knew they will abuse it. But God permitted them the gift of freedom. They were left free to choose, so that what they do they can own. If you are coerced to do a thing, you are not answerable for that. Even in modern jurisprudence, crimes committed under duress are not punishable to that extent. There is extenuating circumstance to it. But in total freedom, when you act or do an action, you are also totally answerable for it. And that is the basis of moral philosophy, also called ethics. God gave them total freedom, and it was the first gift that God gave to mankind, the father, mother, the parents of mankind. They abused it. And when they abused it, they cannot shy away from the wages, the so-called consequences of what they did. And therefore they are answerable for it. Islamic philosophy has a very wonderful view to this problem. Freedom versus determinism. It is a very big issue in philosophy, freedom versus determinism. Are you free or are you determined? If you are determined, you are not answerable for what you do because you are coerced or guided to do what you have done, and therefore you are not answerable. But if you are free, you are answerable for it. And how can you be free to what extent? That also depends. There are two sets of people in Islamic philosophy, the believers and the non-believers, Mu'mins and the Kafirs. Mu'mins are those who believe in the agency of God, Allah, and because they believe, Allah guides them and they take to the right path. Repentance is the most paramount value in Islamic philosophy. Islam itself means submission to the will of God. The word itself means this thing. Allah guides them to the right, on the right path, and they do not err. Or even if they err and sin, there is the whole possibility of repentance available to them. But what about those who are non-believers, who do not believe in the agency of Allah? Does Allah misguide them and then punish them later on when they trespass, when they fail? That will be very harsh to the concept of Allah. That is my way of talking. Muslims will never talk in this way. No, Allah does not misguide them. That would be like a malevolent God. Allah is not a malevolent God. He is all gracious. Rahim kare rahmaniya. The merciful showers mercy. He is very merciful. He does not misguide. He only leaves them to their fate, to their choice. And naturally, their knowledge being deficient, they will err, they will fail, they will fall. And naturally, they will attract punishment. Their answer to the problem of freedom and determinism is this. By the way, I have been used to teaching professional classes. The students there are academically inclined. They desire to make an academic career, and so they have to put in extra reading also. I am in the habit of recommending books which do not have much meaning here for you. You have come on a short trip of the study of philosophy. You enjoy it, that's all. So this problem, freedom and determinism, is a very naughty problem in philosophy. And this issue does not rest there only. God punished them. It is all right, God punished them because they transgressed. But how does God punish the future generations? They are no party to the sin of man's first failing. All future generations stand condemned. How is it? What sort of justice is it? The issue boils down to this. Can sins of a generation visit the heads of other future generations? What our forefathers have done, can we be held answerable and responsible for that? That is the issue. And two lines of thought are advocated in Christian philosophy, one which subscribes to this view, another which is opposed to this view, that sins of one generation have to be borne and suffered by the generation committing the failure, not by subsequent generations. Others hold the opposite view. Anyway, philosophy is a happy hunting ground for all sorts of views. That is there. We taught Saint Augustine in the philosophy class because, as I have been repeatedly telling you, he allows some space to reason. Understand in order that you may believe, believe in order that you may understand. Reason and belief must go hand in hand. Reason should not outrightly reject the facts of faith. But there is a rider at the end also. You cannot understand everything. And this will become more clear today when we go to Saint Thomas Aquinas. The next philosopher for you to be taught is Saint Thomas Aquinas. Saint Thomas Aquinas, his philosophy is more or less akin to Augustine only. If you look at things broadly, saints are mostly alike with minor differences only. That's all. Mostly alike. The element of faith is paramount with them, and they answer and explain everything in terms of God, God-centric. The other day we were hearing the tape recording of our Diamond Jubilee function here. I was also asked to speak. Yesterday I heard, so I was reminded. I said, the Hindu is accused of being otherworldly. We lay all the emphasis upon the values of the other world and ignore this present world. I told them the Hindu is this worldly also and more otherworldly. That was my point of view. They are also similar, in a way, Augustine and Thomas Aquinas. But we shall first have a look at his life. Who was this man, Saint Thomas Aquinas? He is said to have constructed the greatest Catholic system of thought. Greatest Catholic system of thought. Catholicism is the religion of Christianity, you know it, the original Rome religion. Who was this man? Aquino is a small estate in Italy, and he came from the household of feudal lords. His father was a very big official in the king's army, in the king's government. His uncle was a general in the king's army. His brothers also were equally well placed, and they are very powerful people. Landlords, as we call them, feudal lords. And as was the wont in those days, the words of such people were to be taught at home only. They were not public educational institutions. This, our philosopher, Thomas was his name, was also educated at home. Not exactly a home, it was a castle. Kings live in forts, ordinary people live in houses, and the middle rung live in castles. A modest approach to a fort. They used to live in a castle, and he used to be taught at home by Dominican monks. It is a shade of Catholicism. Monks, teaching usually, education usually used to be taken up by monks only, wandering monks, bands of wandering monks. He was taught by them at home, and naturally, as a child, he must have been impressed and even become fascinated of them. That was there. Sometimes he would leave his castle in the company of the monks. Bands of monks kept on moving from place to place, stay for a while. For a short while he would leave with them, come back. Once it so happened he left with his band of monks and did not return for the night. They were naturally very perturbed. They were very big people, horse riders they were. His brothers went out in search of him on horsebacks, caught the band of monks with whom he was moving, brought him back home, beat the monks, and brought him back home. The report was carried to his father. These people who are high ups, they do not freely meet their children as we ordinary mortals do. Father and son are on the same wavelength always. Not so there. Meetings are rare rather. So he was called in audience, as it is called. His father had put in word that when Thomas returns, he should present himself in audience the next day. I have read this account from a very wonderful book, Lives of Great Philosophers by Thomas and Donna Lee. Must be husband and wife couple. Thomas and Donna Lee, Lives of Great Philosophers. You do read this book, borrow it from a library. Even if you want to purchase it, it is not available for sale. It is an old book, but wonderfully written book, Lives of Great Philosophers. This account I read from there. His father was standing in the big hall, decorated with trophies of war and hunt, as was the usual fashion in those days. As the door opened and Thomas entered, he turned around and looking into Thomas's face shouted, "Thomas, what after all you mean to be in life?" This is the exact conversation I am repeating. "Thomas, what after all you want to be in life?" He answered gently, "Father, I want to be a monk." "A what?" "A monk, a beggar, begging for every morsel of bread, scion of the house of Aquino. This thing impossible." All these are words from that book, you know. He says, "Father, it was possible for Saint Augustine." "He was a madman," shouted back the father. Thomas countered, "He was a saint, father." Turned back, left the hall, and history reports father and son never exchanged a word in their life. That was at the end of their meeting. The father naturally must have dealt him very harshly, no doubt, because he was very agitated and perturbed. But all the same, he was disturbed and unhappy about the future looming before his sons. He ordered him to be kept in a sort of house arrest type arrangement in the cellar, in the underground room. He was imprisoned in a way. He was not allowed to go out. Everything was provided to him. The cellar, the underground. They were very unhappy and thinking what to do. Then at last they thought of a subterfuge, a strategy. They thought he should be married, and marriage will perhaps bring some stability in his life, and he will act sanely. So they thought of a girl, searched for one, found one, and one day, as arranged, they took the girl to him so they could see each other. It was a very chilly afternoon, wintry afternoon. They took the girl to him. He was in the underground in the cellar. It was very cold. The fire was burning in the room. He shook the faggots to shed dust down. You have to do it. Because when the faggots, the wood burns, it collects ash and you have to shed it off. Shed it off. So that was the moment when Thomas bent to shake off the dust and the door opened and the girl peeped in. The girl thought he is a madman, he is catching up a burning faggot with which to strike her. She turned back and ran away. That was the end of the whole enterprise. It all ended in a fiasco. The parents were rendered more unhappy. He would not relent the father. His sister, after some time, realized he did not belong to the castle. His abode was somewhere else. So one day, in a small basket, she put half a loaf of bread, some sauce, some eatables, gave it to him as a parting gift and wished him all joy and all success. Thomas took it gratefully, left the home, never turned back to look. On his way forward, he proclaimed, total abandonment of all earthly goods is the path to blessedness and life in God. Here again, total abandonment of all earthly goods. You have to renounce everything. Even today, the Brotherhood of Aquino has this rider. You have to part away with everything that you own. Even today. Renunciation means this thing. You need not be very bewildered. The Hindu ideal of sannyas is this, is more rigorous. You are not permitted to carry even water for the next will on your person. You have to live on the will of God. He proclaims it. They have a fraternity today, brotherhood, in many countries. During the day hours, the brothers work in the field or in the factories. They put in manual labor, earn their wages every day, and in the evening together, they eat their frugal meals, sing the glory of God during the night, and live their lives like this, doing good whatever is possible. This is the founding, this is the fraternity which Thomas founded. This was the saint you will read about today. I told you he is said to have constructed the greatest Catholic system of thought, meaning there is bound to be a preponderance of philosophy in his system. Number one, Aristotelian influence is glaringly perceptible in his system. He accepts Aristotelian philosophy nearly in totality with a minor addition here or there. If you recall, Aristotle says God alone is the pure form. He says, being a monk, apart from God, there are other beings also who are pure form. Say spiritual beings, angels, they may be pure form. The concept of matter and form or essence, as Aristotle tells us, he accepts matter and form. The evolutionary process he accepts. In a way, a repetition of the Aristotelian philosophy he accepts. He says it is not possible to prove the existence of God, but it is not possible also to disprove Him. You cannot prove God, but you cannot disprove Him either. But you can prove Him indirectly by observing the chain of causes, movements, teleological movement, all these things, you can derive the agency of God is very much there. He says point blank, matters of religion are not issues of philosophy, they are matters of faith. They should not be assessed and analyzed on the platform of philosophy. Matters of faith are matters of will, not of reason. See, he tells us point blank, matters of faith, religious matters are matters of faith, matters of will, not of reason. All matters of religion, reason may not be able to explain, but no matter of religion should be counter to reason. This great concession he permits. No matter of religion, nothing should go against reason, against the dictate of reason. Reason may not be able to explain everything, but it should not go against reason. This is a little bit greater ground he concedes to reason in matters religion and philosophical. This is his philosophy. As I told you, life in a monastery, the most active life is a life devoted to the speculation and contemplation on the nature of God in a monastery. The householder's life naturally is looked down upon, as it is done here also. And this contribution he has made to the bulk of philosophical study, that nothing should go against reason. All incidents of irrationality found in the history of philosophical and religious development stand rejected. How much suffering the human race underwent to accept that the earth revolves round the sun. The opposition was based on unreason, not reason. Anyway, it is a very radical step for a saint to concede that nothing should go counter to reason. So this is all about Saint Thomas Aquinas. As I told you, the two are identical. Marriage is looked down upon. Love of property and all these things, as I told you, even today, total abandonment, you have to abandon, give up. You have to renounce everything. That is the life of a saint in a monastery. A more effective affirmation of Aristotelian philosophy is to be found in Aquinas' philosophy. And that way we finish our study of the two saints, Saint Augustine and Saint Thomas Aquinas. Now you have so far studied 5 philosophers: Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, the 3 mighty Greeks, the 3 great Greeks, and Augustine and Aquinas. You have a whole lot of history of Western philosophy, which is a very long, big thing, but you must have a bird's eye view of whatever happened there. Details may and you cannot be posted also with, but we shall have a look. Your syllabus also mentions an outline study. You must have an idea. During this period which followed, for about 850 years, a little less than a century, what is known as the Dark Ages also followed. Small systems also developed, but principally Christian theology developed. This issue, whether the sins of one generation can visit upon the heads of subsequent generations, was raised in Christian religious environs and answered both ways. Christian theology developed. And theology, as I told you, it starts from God and explains the effect. It is not denial of reason, but it is neither assertion of reason also. That is how it protests. The Dark Ages also followed. Dark doesn't mean the sun stopped rising. It means the light of reason was diminished, was not that profound. And nearly after 850 years, we come down to the study of French philosopher René Descartes, who is also known as the father of modern philosophy. René Descartes. I will give you the spelling once only, but it is not necessary for you to know it. R-E-N-E, René Descartes, Descartes. Descartes. Why is he known the father of modern philosophy? For some profound contributions he made to the study of philosophy. Descartes says every conceivable explanation is to be found in philosophy, from the sanest to the absurdest. There is what is called in Shakespearean language confusion worse confounded. Confusion worse confounded. It is all confusions everywhere. Any answer is available in philosophy. Why is it so? He asks. Any opinion will find a place in philosophy. How far can it be reliable? You can yourself surmise. Why is it so? And Descartes arrives at an irrefutable truth. It is because the methodology is defective. The way of doing philosophy is defective. It is erroneous. Any method is employed to answer philosophical problems. So he vowed that he would not accept anything for granted. Now see, there are two approaches. You will not accept anything for granted means what? You reject everything, you deny everything, or you doubt everything. Denial also is an assertion. You know it does not exist, therefore you are denying it. Whereas you don't know what you profess to be knowing. So he would say, he will take to the method of doubt. He will not deny anything. This table is not here. This is denial. I know that it is not here. This is my knowledge. Not denying. Is the table here? Perhaps. Is the boy there? Perhaps. Meaning I am doubtful. I will doubt everything. Cogito ergo sum. That is his dictum. Cogito ergo sum. I will doubt everything, he says. I will not accept anything for granted. skeptically, as it is called in philosophy, I will look at things. Is the table here? Perhaps. Is the boy there? Perhaps. Perhaps. That is doubting. But in doubting everything, how can I doubt my existence? Who is doubting? I am doubting. That is proved. You cannot doubt your own existence. The very fact that you are doubting proves that you are there. Cogito ergo sum. I doubt, therefore I exist. It means this thing. He started with this methodology and then we shall continue tomorrow. Hari Om.